Hey everyone, I have another great author interview for you. Anne-Sophie Jouhanneau joins me on the podcast today. We talk about her debut novel, Kisses and Croissants, which comes out in just a couple days on April 6th. You guys are going to love this novel. It is so warm and cozy and makes me want to travel to Paris immediately. So let's go ahead and get to know Anne-Sophie. Let's go ahead and start off and have you tell me all about your upcoming novel, Kisses and Croissants.
So Kisses and Croissants is about Mia, an American girl who moves to Paris for a summer ballet program. And while she's there, she meets a very cute French boy called Louis, and together they explore the city of lights and love. And they also go on a bit of an art hunt to discover the answers behind a family mystery in Mia's family. Ooh. So there's a little bit of ballet drama and romance and a little painting mystery.
I love it. It sounds amazing. I did ballet growing up and I loved ballet. I don't have the right body type for ballet or probably the discipline for it, but I always loved it. I still do. I love to go watch it. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
It's so wonderful. So I love that aspect of it. But yeah, add that with a little romance and some mystery. That's everything I love all wrapped up.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, tell me a little bit about your journey to getting this book published and coming out into the world. How did that happen for you?
This particular book was pretty straightforward. Very much the classic, so I already had an agent from a previous book that I wrote that I didn't sell. And then this one just I worked on it for a couple of years and before it went on submission. But when it did go on submission, it was a pretty easy, straightforward process, which I know it's not always the case, but yeah. We had a lot of excitement really early on, and it ended up selling in 3 days or 4 days or something like that.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, that was very, very exciting time. But we sold it on partial, so then I still had to write the rest of it, the 2/3 of it, I guess. So yeah, and so there was about a 2-year period between, there will be by the end, a 2-year period between the time it's sold and the time it comes out, which is pretty common, I guess. It just feels very long.
It's very long.
When it happened March 2019 and my editor said, okay, this is for spring 2021, it just felt like forever in the future.
It is so forever. Publishing is so slow. I'm a very impatient person, and but I have lots of family who don't and friends who don't understand the publishing world, right? So they're like, when can I read your book? If you get an agent and get it published, will it be out in a few months? It's you don't understand the sheer slowness of the publishing industry.
So true. It's very, and even now, it's funny because the advanced reader copies have been out for, I would say, since September, I guess. And so a lot of people have been reading it, and there's reviews and online and on social media. And my friends are like, oh, so how's the book selling? I'm like, no, it's not coming out until April. And it's just very difficult to explain that a lot of people are reading it right now, and yet it's not available to the public until, a few months later.
Yeah, it is quite a confusing thing for those people who don't understand it. Well, so you had an agent already, and you had a book that went on sub and didn't sell, which I'm glad you bring up. I'm sure that was so hard. I feel all the agents or all the authors who I've talked to who've had that happen, it's such a hard thing, but I think it's something for other authors out there who are maybe in the querying trenches right now, a good thing for them to remember. Unfortunately, your book won't always sell, and that's super hard to deal with. But tell me how you approached querying when you had, that first book and you were finding your agent. How did you go about querying?
Yeah.
What were your tools that you used? And then maybe if you could share a top tip for writers who are in the querying process right now.
Yeah, sure. I think I use the tools that I'm sure you've heard of before, because everyone I know uses the same sort of websites, like Query Tracker
Right.
is extremely helpful.
Yes.
I might forget some of the names because it's been a little while. I find Manuscript Wishlist. I think I don't know what the exact website is, but there's a website where, all the agents, and not all, but some agents and editors have their wish list. I find Twitter extremely helpful. A lot of agents are on there. A lot of them are sharing very useful advice. Query Shark, the blog, is been, and there's a huge archive going way back. That's very helpful to read through. Agent interviews, on podcasts can be very helpful. It is, I think, to do it well, I think it takes a huge amount of research. Just finding the right agent, figuring out how to craft your query, how to figure out your comps, which is very important. And, all of these things, it just takes a lot of trial and error as well. I'll say that your query is not just a one and done document, right? Like you need to, probably you'll be editing it and revising it constantly depending on the feedback and response that you get. So I use all these tools. I will say as well, to be completely fair, I'm in New York and I have quite a big network of writers around me. So I did have like a lot of friends who had agents or who knew agents, and it opens doors, like I think at the end, the agent will always judge you on the basis of your manuscript. Like no one is going to sign you because you know somebody, you're someone's friend or something like that. But sometimes it moves you a little bit higher up the pie, which, when you're impatient, it can help.
It can definitely help. Yeah, I mean, there's I feel like even if you're not in New York, like I'm on the West Coast, but I found through Twitter making lots of connections with agents or other people in the industry is very possible. So I think that's a good tip too. I think social media can be hard for some people, and for me too. Like there are days I have to take a break from social media, but there's so much greatness in our writing community that you can find online, and all of your resources that you listed are great things to use when querying. I do think that it does require lots of research and lots of time. Like we want the querying process to go by so quick and to be out of those trenches, right? Like nobody loves to query, but it definitely will go better if you spend some time researching and really paying attention to who you're querying.
And ask yourself, like, what is the right agent for you? And it's very personal. I think who might be the right person. I think it's very easy to see agents for example, on Twitter who have huge followings or who seem like they repping, all of the big authors or selling really big book deals all the time. But these are very few and far between. There's a lot of, there are a lot of amazing agents who are never on Twitter.
Right.
And you would probably never know, what they do and the books they sell. And I think that can be a little bit, you can be on Twitter and feel like, oh, there's like 5 agents for me. But no, there can be a lot more. It's just, you just have to expand a little bit based on what really matters to you, I guess.
Yes, and that is such a good point to bring up because that agent-author relationship is so personal, and you want to make sure you're finding the right person who, is going to have the communication style that works with you, that is, has the same vision for your book, or a vision that, you're okay with and in line with. There's a lot that goes into that relationship that authors, it can be so exciting to get that, first offer from an agent and be like, oh, this is it, I got to sign, or nobody else is going to take me. But you got to make sure you're really still thinking about if that's going to be the best relationship.
Very, very true. And I will say as well, talking about, manuscripts that don't sell, that happens so frequently. And I feel like this, published authors really have to tell that to aspiring or authors who aspire to be published, because pretty much every single author I know has at least one manuscript that didn't sell, so often more than one. And most authors I know as well have had multiple agents. I've recently switched agents as well, and I think sometimes, and I think, again, when you're querying for the first time, you just want that agent. You want someone to say yes, and that's very understandable and fair. But if you are aiming for a long writing career, there will be several unsold manuscripts. There will likely be more than one agent. I mean, you never know. Sometimes you meet the right person right off the bat, but your career may change and evolve, and that might mean different, changes along the way. So I think thinking long term is the right move, even if it's hard.
Yes, definitely. That's such a good thing to bring up, because I do think I think people talk about it more nowadays, but like I feel like when I first really started writing and looking into being published, I didn't see that information or authors talking about like going on sub and not selling or switching agents. So I think it is important to just have other authors, who are aspiring to be published, to just be aware of in the back of their mind as they go throughout the process.
Yeah.
Well,
and as far as a querying tip, I think all the tips that are out there that I read, and I'm sure you read, in your research are always very good and valid, I think. I think there's a reason why people will, say over and over, like, this is how to write a query. This is the information you have to you have to include. Querying in batches, like only starting with 5 to 7 agents, see how you go, and then moving forward. I think generally speaking is a good idea. It will take longer, but everything will. And the other thing I will say is to get comfortable with this process, because I think there's this belief sometimes that, once I have an agent, everything will work out. And that is just not really what really happens. Sometimes you will get an agent and you will immediately go on sub and get a book deal 3 weeks later. Yes, that is totally possible, and that does happen. But more often than not, you will do a lot more revisions with your new agent. You will, they will get delayed for loads of reasons. You will get delayed. A lot of things can happen, and then the submission process feels very much like the querying process, and then the revision process. This sort of like stressful time and hurry up and wait time that will happen with other things. So, So however uncomfortable querying feels, try and accept it, because you will feel this again.
So basically, to sum it all up, if you're impatient, you gotta deal with it and try and learn some patience throughout the process.
I mean, I'm very impatient as well, but I feel like that is the one thing that publishing has taught me, is patience. That you can't make it move faster. I mean, sometimes you can a little bit, but not really.
No, not really. Well, my next question, I feel like maybe I already know the answer to part of it, but I'd love to know, what was your favorite part and your least favorite part of the publishing journey that you've been on?
Yeah. So my favorite part might be right now. I know you scheduled this to come out close to the pub date, but we're about 4 or 5 months from publication day, and I'm starting to be in touch with my publicist at Random House. I just got word about the audiobook production and how that process will work, and how we'll work with the producer for the audiobook. I'm starting to talk with a few different people in the industry, at Random House or external, I guess. And it's kind of really exciting to see the behind the scenes, librarians as well, a little bit, book reviewers. And it's kind of exciting to start to talk with people, about this. It feels more real, and it's seeing the behind the scenes. It's really fun, and seeing all these different people who are involved in the process. It's very fun and exciting, and starting to make it feel very real.
That's wonderful.
Other than that, I think the day I got the offer was just I think the way it happened, especially in my case, was just very something out of the movies. and it was just a wild day, and I think I'll remember it forever.
Oh, I bet. That is wonderful. I mean, I think those are all great things. And to see, not only your book coming to life, but all these other pieces with the publication and the publicity of it, especially in the weird time where we're at right now. That's got to be exciting still to have those things, even if, some of the more quote-unquote normal publicity, opportunities you're not able to have.
Yeah, it's challenging. I think the good thing is I've had time to get used to it. I felt way worse for authors who had books coming out this spring, like spring 2020, where, they already, I'm sure, had a plan, and that plan went, completely pear-shaped. I think for me, I don't think there's a scenario in which, I will have, like, I've been invited to, like, starting to talk to, and I've already been invited to, like, festivals and things like that. Most likely they will be virtual, and I think I'm preparing. I mean, it just, what will happen, I think. So I've had time to get used to the idea that I'm not really going to see anyone other than through my screen.
Which, I really did enjoy seeing the virtual Y'all Fest, whatever that one's called. I think I said it right. But I loved that virtual. I mean, that's something that I wouldn't have been able to go to in person, otherwise. And so it was kind of nice that now it was more accessible. So, I mean, you'll be able to see, I think, and be connected with so many more readers than maybe you would have been before, which is kind of cool to think about.
I think that's very cool and very true. And I think, again, like I said, in New York, there's so many authors and publishing people in New York that sometimes, in the past I've definitely felt in that little bubble. But this year it's encouraged me to, like, reach out to book reviewers and bookstagrammers and YouTubers, all of these people who are not in New York, because it makes no difference right now. So I think it's just encouraged me to, like, think outside, think outside my usual network, I guess. Which has been good.
That's very good. Well, what about your least favorite part of the publishing process?
My least favorite part, so I think being unsub. I mean, for this book, like I said, it went on for 4 days. I really cannot complain. It's just you just sort of jump every time an email comes through, which is kind of the same as when you're querying. I will say, generally speaking, the least favorite part is the schedule is very tricky, meaning that, like, I have a schedule on, like, when my revisions I do, first pass pages, there are a lot of steps along the way. But I think it just sort of changes because there are many people involved and their schedule changes. My editor looks after many, many books. And I think it's just, you never know when, like, it's just very hurry up and wait. Like, you might have 3 weeks to do this round of revision, but then you don't really know when it's coming back to you. So it makes, like, planning your life for the next few months really tricky. Not that right now it doesn't really matter, but I think in the past, if you're trying to plan, like, vacation and things like that, it can be a little challenging.
I can imagine that. But I mean, to have to wait, and then when you get something that you need to do, you have to, like, full throttle go at it, I'm sure is a little bit all encompassing.
Yeah, and things change, and I think, again, there are so many people involved in this process that I think the author is, once you've written the book, like, obviously when you're writing, it's mostly you, but then in the next steps after that, there are so many people who are doing their jobs, and you're not necessarily involved in that. So you don't always have full visibility, on what's going on as the author.
Yeah, definitely not. Well, thank you for sharing those. My next question is more about your writing style, how you go about drafting. Are you more of a pantser, a planner, or do you fall somewhere in between?
I have done both. I think now I'm very committed to plotting. I find that I have written several books on deadline. And because so this is my first US book, but I'm also published in French, my other language. So even though this is, my first book here, I have written many other books before.
Wonderful.
I think plotting is very helpful if you're on a deadline, because it does save time to think through all of the plot points and, like, the storyline in general in advance. Right. I do think you want to. I think sometimes people say, well, if I write an outline, then I have to stick to it. And no, you don't. You can definitely, you can do whatever you want. But I think just having, like, a big picture vision at the start, whether it's like a 10-page outline or just like a 1-page summary, can be very helpful. So I think now I'm team plotting.
I agree with you. I think that plotting, when I first started really wanting to to write, I was definitely a pantser, and I think there's magic in pantsing, for me at least. I love it. But yeah, plotting definitely, it saves me so much revision time and like rewrite time. But I'm the type of person where if I do it too much, or if I do the whole book, I do think that way, where I'm like, I can't change it. Like, I feel like I put so much time into it. So I like plot as I go. Like, I'll plot out, the next 50 pages or however much it will be, which just helps me feel like I can change it a little bit and be a little more flexible, because my brain...
I like it that way as well. Yeah. I like it that way. I think pantsing I think it is a fun way to write. I think what's happened to me too many times is I get 100 pages in and I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. And then it's easy to, for me, it's easy to get discouraged and to just say, oh, this isn't working, I don't know what to do, and to put it aside. Whereas I think, at least with plotting, I think what can be really helpful is to figure out the big turning points. Like, you don't have to know all of the details, but to have I know roughly how this story is going to, which turns it's going to take. It can be really helpful.
It's very helpful, yeah. I have found with pantsing that I did that so many times, like wrote myself into a corner too, where I was like, oh, I don't know where to go from here. I have to delete like 50 pages to get out of this hole. So yes, plotting is where it's at for me too. I love that. But I love this question because I know people who like hardcore outline and they love it, and that is the only thing that works for them. And I know people who do pants and they pants their whole way through, and it's great. And I think for maybe authors who are just starting out or who don't really have their process nailed down yet, it's good to hear like, okay, this is what works for somebody else. Like, maybe I'll give that a try.
For sure. And I think also it's not really, it's not really one of the, I mean, as you say, it can definitely be somewhere in between, because I've also heard of authors who will pants their way through the first draft and then they will outline, like when they've got all their ideas on paper. So their first draft is not really a first draft, it's just like 100-page outline sort of, where they just tell themselves the story, and then they're like, okay, from this I'm gonna figure out all my plot points. And I quite like, for this book I had a very detailed outline, and it just made drafting just a million times easier. But we spent a lot of time on the outline, so there's also that.
That's true, yeah. And I think too, it's good to know, like, for me, I've written a couple different genres, and what works for me changes kind of based on the story too. So I mean, it's good to just like be flexible with yourself as you go throughout the process.
Yes.
Well, thank you for sharing that. My next thing, I'd love to have you share something with me that your readers wouldn't necessarily know about you.
Sure. I was a bit stumped question when I read it, because the book isn't out yet, so I don't know if I can, even though a lot of people have read it already, I don't know if I have readers yet, so to speak. I think the thing about me is I'm French, and I think sometimes people get a little bit confused about what I mean by this. And so basically I moved to the US only 9 years ago, so I did not go to school here, and so I don't have all of that sort of culture, if you know what I mean. Like, I feel like it's very different if you move to a country like at a young age, like, and you went to school there, right, and you sort of built all your social circle and in that country, like through that process. I think it's a little bit different. For me, I still, even though I've been here a little while now, still feel a little bit like, an outsider.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I could tell by your accent. And, I love that you took that and your experiences from your country where you were born and raised into this book. And I'm sure there's lots of really good, authentic Frenchness to the book.
Yeah. I tried. Yes, that's really what I tried to bring to it as much as possible.
Well, that's wonderful. For those of us who won't be, nobody's traveling, so this will feel like a little vacation, a little French vacation. That'll be cool.
I hope so. We need escapism right now,
yes,
for sure.
We definitely do. My next question, I gotta change the wording of it because there's no typical day anymore, right? It's so different. But how much time do you spend writing every day? Like, what is your goal to get writing every day?
So, yes, I read this question. I was like, there is no typical day. I mean, there's definitely no typical day for me. I'm not so I don't really set an amount of time aside. I'm a full-time writer. I do a lot of different types of writing, but so I work for myself, and I have done so for quite some time. So it's not like I have 2 hours before I go to work type thing.
Right.
To write. I will say that when I'm drafting, and that's the other thing, is the writing part of writing a book is actually a small amount of time compared to all the other stages, I think. So generally speaking, when I'm drafting, I try to aim for 2,000 words in a day. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes it doesn't happen at all whatsoever.
Right.
Sometimes I do that in 3 hours. Sometimes it takes me all day. There is no typical day. I think I do, especially when I'm, on deadline, try to get 2,000 words a day in, and then revision is just a little bit. Revision is so. I mean, I think most of my time is spent on revision, and it really depends. Some chapters are in great shape when I get to them, and some are just like random lines here and there. So they need a lot of work. So yeah. I don't really. I'm not a morning person. My productivity really increases throughout the day, so it's kind of, I get most of my writing done like in the last couple of hours or wherever I end my day, which changes day to day. Like sometimes I'll stop work at 7 p.m. and because I'm a night owl, sometimes I'll keep working until 10, 11, sometimes even later. So it's pretty random.
I like that, though. I like that you're flexible with yourself and you still have a goal and try to stick with that, which is the important part of, like, taking writing seriously. But, yeah, I mean, be flexible with yourself throughout the day, especially because there's no typical day anymore and because the world is so weird. So, yeah, just give yourself a little bit of grace. But I think a word count goal is so helpful instead of a time limit, because you're right. Some days my word count goal is 1,000 every day, and some days I can do that in, like, 20 minutes. And some days it takes me all day long to get nowhere near 1,000 words a day. So yeah, just being gracious with yourself is very helpful through that process.
Yeah, totally. And I think, it's kind of funny with word count, because sometimes, as you said, like I might write, I don't know, 600-700 words in 25 minutes, and then the next, it will be 100 words over the next hour. Like there is no, I feel like there's no logic to the madness. I think, at least for me, like it's quite random.
It's very random. I'm with you too, and I had a baby this year, and I feel like too that changed everything for me too. Because before him, I mean, I had two older kids from my husband's previous marriage, so like they could do things on their own and take care of themselves, and I could sit with my computer and do writing like with them there. But this little guy likes to like touch all the keys of my computer and be attached to me 24/7. So it makes writing in like short spurts is where it happens now, or on my phone in the notes section. So yeah, whatever it is, just be.
I actually like that.
I do too. I like doing it in the notes section. As things come to me throughout the day.
I will do it. I mean, I really like that as well. I mean, now I'm at home all day, obviously, like everyone else. But I write on the subway a lot, like in the notes app. I'm like, I have 20 minutes to wherever I'm going, and sometimes I'll write half a chapter in that time. Like it's just, I like little bursts. I find it. For me, more helpful mentally, like just think, I'm just going to write for 20 minutes, than to tell myself, I'm going to write for the next 8 hours. Like it's just way too overwhelming to think I'm going to spend my entire day writing, which is still what I don't think anyone spends really 8 hours straight writing. But maybe they do. I don't know.
I mean, I feel like that sounds exhausting to me, to spend an actual 8 hours writing. But no, I love writing in bursts. I used to do that all the time when I worked outside the home. I would take the train. And that was the best writing time. Put my headphones in, write on my phone. Oh, it was so good. But now, I don't leave my house very often.
Do you find that it's changed, like, since you've had a baby? Like, do you find that you change, like, what, other than the birth, like, what hours of the day works best for you?
Yeah, I found that, I mean, it's when he's napping is usually the best. Or I used to be a morning person. Like, I would get up at 5 and be, like, chipper and ready to go. And now if I wake up early, he somehow senses I'm awake and also wakes up. So I find it's like I'm more of a night owl writer now, which is, so different. But I found, like, some really good grooves I've gotten into at night after everybody's gone to bed. So yeah, it's definitely kind of the opposite.
I like that. When everything's quiet and dark outside, yes. I do my best writing then. I think sometimes I don't always want to write at that time, because then I go to bed really late, and then it just sort of, it messes everything the next day. But I really like those hours, like
I do too. When it's dark and quiet and, there's nothing else going on. It's very peaceful.
Yeah, you just sort of download your brain before going to bed. I think, it really works for me.
Yes, I'm with you there. I used to love the early morning hours, but now I'm switched, and I'm okay with it. Someday when he is older, maybe I'll go back to being a morning person.
Yeah.
Well, my next question is, kind of on this same thread. Like, writing is a lot of work at times, right? Like, it's very much an act of taking something inside yourself and putting it externally on the page, right? But I mean, especially in the world we're in right now, but even before the craziness of the pandemic, it can be stressful. It can be draining emotionally to write as you live your life as a human being and do all the other things you need to do. So in your experience dealing with this, just, kind of self-care and writing still, what would your, like, top tip be for other authors in this time?
Well, the first thing I would say is, and I agree that it is sometimes, stressful and difficult, and that is all very true. But I think I would ask yourself, if it is frequently, like, draining and stressful, like, why are you doing it? And I'm not saying this in the sense of, like, don't do it, but more like, ask yourself, like, what is the goal you're trying to achieve? What is the big picture here? What is your long-term dream? And, like, dream aloud. Like, by all means, I think we all have really, really big dreams. And I think not all of, a lot of us have big dreams, and I think it's really fun to think about them while you write. So, like, just trying to keep your eye on the prize, sort of whatever you're trying to achieve, and whether that's like, oh, this story matters so much to me and I wanted to put it on paper, or if it's like I really want a book deal, like all of these answers. I think there's no wrong answer, but I think that can be harmful. I also, and just going back to what I said earlier, I do think it really helps to think small when you're writing. I have written quite a few books by now, but every time I sit down to write, like, if I think I'm writing a book, I find, suddenly, like, my heart sort of, like, crunches, like, I just, like, my body tenses. And I think, write a sentence, write a paragraph. I think those things are very good goals to have when you first sit down at your computer every day, or and it doesn't have to be every day. I think there's a myth out there that writers write every single day. I don't think that's true at all. Some do, but many don't. And just, like, try and see, like, can you write a page? And I think because it is what you do, right? Like, no one's going to write a full novel in one day. So ultimately, every day you're not writing a book, you're writing, like, a very tiny chunk of a story. And I find that, I just find that helpful. And just really trying to figure out what works for you, I think, because I am not a morning person at all. And, you read a lot of these stories about, like, just you were talking about earlier, people, I wake up at 5 a.m. and I have to be, and I have 3 kids, and then I have a full-time job, and I get 2,000 words done a day, and it's just so overwhelming for me anyway to hear these things. Figure out what time of day works for you, and it can change, obviously. Like, I don't think it has to always be the same every day. Which space in your right now in your house or coffee shop, or I used to have a co-working space. I feel like switching spaces, even just within your apartment, your house, can be helpful. And I also think, like, it's very most of the pressure that we feel as writers is self-imposed, I think. So yes, once you have a book deal, like for example, I had a 2-book deal, so I'm on deadline for the second book. So there's definitely a little bit of pressure, coming just from the fact that I have to hand in this book at a specific time.
Right.
But I think writers we can be really tough on ourselves, I think, generally speaking, saying, I have to write, it has to be, I have to finish it by this day. I have to clear it on this time. I have to hand it in, and all of these things. And while I'm a deadline-driven person, so I find those deadlines helpful, but I think sometimes they also can just hinder your process. Because I will say, like, if you pursue traditional publishing, the timeline is so outside your control in every possible way that there's, in some ways, there's just really no point in, like, putting that pressure on ourselves. So I think I would say, like, to anyone who really wants to write, a novel and really wants to get it traditionally published, like, figure out a way to enjoy the process. Because if it is constantly stressful and draining, then I think, something must, is worth changing. Like, there's probably something that can be tweaked in your process so that you don't feel that way all the time. Though I think it is normal to feel that way some of the time, for sure.
Yeah, definitely some of the time. But I think especially for those authors who maybe aren't signed yet and aren't on like a deadline with traditional publishing, let yourself enjoy it. Like, remember the joy. Like, we do this because we love stories, because we love, the worlds that we're building. So yeah, make sure you, as you go through the process, you're finding joy in it somehow. Instead of just like, I mean, you don't want to be sitting at your computer like, oh, I have to do this today again. Like, that's not what we want for something that's so, emotional and comes from such a deep place inside of you. Yeah, find the joy in it for sure.
But I do think sometimes the best writing comes out of, like, you pushing yourself through the discomfort, right?
Yes.
And that's why I think, I don't know a single author who just is loving writing every minute of every day and they just, like, have this big smile on their face while they type for hours and hours. I don't think that's, I mean, it happens to me some days, but it's not very frequent.
It's not
I think
every day.
if that's a goal and it's something you really want to do, like just sit down and push through some of the discomfort, but also allow yourself that if it's really one day you're just really not feeling it, then just go for a walk. Like, it's okay. I'll be there tomorrow.
Yes. So remember that some days not writing is still writing, and that is okay.
Yes, for sure. And I will say, and that is one thing to enjoy about the process before you have an agent, and certainly before you have a book deal. It's your own timeline. You do whatever you want, whenever you want, and that's fun. I think that's fun. I think and I know it's very easy to be like, I really want that book deal, and I totally get that. But I think then it becomes a little bit less about just you. So while it's just you, like, enjoy it.
Yes, definitely enjoy it. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think that is all great questions and great things to remember as you're a writer going through the process. I have just one last question for you. I have been told over and over that it is the hardest question I ask, so I do apologize. I'd love to know what your favorite book is right now. This is not your favorite book of all time, but just something you've read recently that you really enjoyed.
So it is a very difficult question, especially, so I read a lot in a lot of genres, and I don't really... I don't have favorites. I do keep a list of everything I read, and I keep a list of, like, books that I enjoyed enough to, like, recommend them around me. And I was just at a bookstore over the weekend, and one of these books was there, and I was talking to my family, I really like this book. It was Writers and Lovers by Lily King.
Oh.
I just really, it was just really well written and just a really lovely, enjoyable story. I really liked it. There's a few, I mean, I feel like I'm not going to say anything super new right now. I love The Vanishing House by Brit Bennett, which I think, it's just masterfully done. And I read that over the summer, but I still think about it a lot. I And I another book that I can't pick one. I don't know if anyone else actually just picks one, but like I cannot just pick one. I also read recently Anxious People by Frederick Backman.
Oh yeah.
Which just was really like a really fun, like fun, not just like a fun read, but also just like really like the way it's done is very interesting. I don't know if you read it, but like not just like the multi POV, like the story structure. I love books like that just sort of play with structure and POV and all of that, and it was well done.
Well, wonderful. Thank you for sharing those. Yeah, nobody really ever picks one. Usually I get two. I think the most someone gave me was like 8 books for their favorite book.
I know. I mean, I could keep going.
Yeah, it's hard to pick.
Really could.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today and telling us all about your upcoming novel, Kisses and Croissants, and letting me and my listeners get to know you a little bit better.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. Please make sure you are subscribed so you never miss an episode. And if you would, please leave a review. It always helps me so much when there are reviews and ratings on the podcast. And I will see you guys next time.